All right, we are live, Eyes on Africa News and online at eoanews.com and on youtube.com/Hermela TV. Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. We've got a really good show today, several parts to it. The first part, we're going to be talking about the midterm election, talking to two representatives from AIPAC. Talking about how you can engage civically as the fifth day of African Union peace talks on Ethiopia wrap up, and a lot of issues around that, whether it's Western media outlets, once again, and how they're painting the picture. But also this time, the government is striking back as well. So we'll be having that conversation first, and then later on, we'll talk a little bit about the shakeup on Twitter and how that could affect censorship or the lack thereof. While we're waiting for everybody to hop on, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe, or like, subscribe, and share, whatever order that you would like. I think it's going to be a really good conversation today. Two parts. The first half hour or so, we'll be talking about more civic engagement, community building, and then the second part, we'll talk more about Twitter and censorship. Kenneth said Twitter is now open. I guess the bird is freed, as Elon Musk has said. But what does that actually mean? What is going to be the process of rolling back some of the censorship at Twitter? I've spoken to some folks on the inside that say the tensions are high at Twitter. A lot of people worried about their jobs. They're not sure if they're going to be, have a job when they wake up in the morning. But so far, it looks like only top executives, actually three top executives, have lost their jobs. But there were some rumors going around that said that some of the employees, or a large chunk of the employees, would be slashed. But it looks like Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, has appeased some of those concerns. So again, while we're about to get started, make sure you like, subscribe, and share so that we can get everybody in here on this Friday evening. A lot of top stories. Fifth day of African Union peace talks have wrapped. What does it mean? What's happening on the ground in Ethiopia? All of that and more. Feel free to comment in the comment section. We're also going to be taking questions at the end of each segment, and we'll have some help behind the scenes with some producers that will be fielding the comments and questions. So stay engaged on that. With that said, here are the top stories today.
The fifth of 7 days of Ethiopia peace talks have wrapped in South Africa. The African Union is set to be leading them. Mediating the talks are former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, and former South African Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Nguka. The United States and the United Nations are said to be observing, but State Department spokesperson Ned Price said this week that Special Envoy Mike Hammer would also be participating.
Our Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Mike Hammer, is in South Africa to observe and to participate in the AU-led talks.
Western media outlets also continue their pressure on the Ethiopian government in this conflict. Many admit the federal government does appear to have a military upper hand against the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels who ran a brutal 27-year regime that ended in 2018. The Ethiopian government has also struck back at Western media outlets, think tanks, and others that continue to levy uncorroborated allegations against it. In a statement, the state's communications service says in part, the government of Ethiopia can no longer tolerate the defamatory falsehood being spread against Ethiopia by various Western entities. It is shameful that they parrot TPLF's irresponsible propaganda. Some are jumping to rescue the group no matter what. It goes on to say the bandwagon of accusations and slander does not change the facts on the ground. And on the ground, the federal army continues to hold several cities in Tigray, with sources saying fighting continues around the region's capital city of Mekelle. And new from Ethiopia's Minister of Defense, Dr. Abraham Belai, who himself is from Tigray. Belai released statements in 3 languages calling on collective calm and a new mindset for Ethiopians from Tigray. The minister says in part, the serious crisis we're facing in Tigray can only be solved when our people themselves become a part of a solution with a new mindset. Outdated political party or ideology will not ensure peace, security, and stability for the people of Tigray.
So I think that's a really interesting statement that the Minister of Defense has put out. What does that mean? Is anyone hearing it? Any of the folks from Tigray, whether it's on the ground where they have dropped a lot of leaflets letting the people know that this fight is not between the Ethiopian government and the people, but the TPLF armed rebels who occupied that region for the last 2+ years. So curious to have a conversation about what that might mean for some people. So feel free to comment on that. And then the statement from the government communications services before that, I think, was a very strong statement and actually addressing Western media, think tanks, organizations that you wouldn't otherwise buy into the political propaganda of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, doing just that. So I think it's interesting that they are addressing it in the way that they are. It is October 28th, and we are just days away from the midterm elections. A lot of people have talked about how one way to push back against politicians that are anti-Ethiopia or that continue to align themselves with the Tigray People's Liberation Front is to vote. And that is something that the Ethiopian and Eritrean communities and allies have been working on. And so I have two of those people with me today to talk about what you can do at the polls on November 4th. You know, any questions that you have about who to vote for. AIPAC has the American Ethiopian Public Affairs Committee, or Public Action Committee, we'll get it right, has a list of people that you can vote for in different states. So we'll go through that list with Executive Director Mesfin Taganu. We'll also talk to AIPAC's Yapsara Zodi about what it's been like to work on mobilizing the communities. She's worked on the mobilizing of voters for the Virginia governor's race that a lot of Ethiopians and Eritrean Americans in that area are said to have had a huge role in turning that state red and voting out McAuliffe and voting in Governor Youngkin. Without further ado, my two guests, Mesfin Taganu, Yapsara Zodi, thank you guys so much for coming and making the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for
My pleasure. So you guys have been doing a lot of work. I know the midterms are coming up, and there's a lot of work that goes around that, which is, education, asking or answering rather people's questions, helping people figure out who to vote for based on their stance on Ethiopia. So Mesfin, I'll start with you. First of all, a lot of people would be surprised to find that AIPAC just started during this conflict out of just a necessity of an organization that is mobilizing Ethiopian Americans and Eritrean Americans and those who have connections to Africa. So what has that journey been like, and what are you guys most focused on right now?
Yeah, thank you, Hermela. Yes, AIPAC started its operation 18-19 months ago as a result of this conflict. It's born because of the conflict, of course. When you read today, one of the most influential African diaspora group, you think that this was an established, 20 years organization. No, it's just only 18 months. And so since its inception, the goal was to figure out how to really stop the West from spreading this incredibly damaging and fake information on Ethiopia, in addition to pushing legislations and making a concerted effort to really dismantle that country. So the journey has been, it has been a sleepless 18 months, I would say. A lot of work, a lot of learning in the process. None of us, neither activists nor been engaged in the political process to this extent before. So there was a lot of learning. Now, the outcome of the last 18 months struggle has been, in a way, satisfactory, I would say. I think we have done several work with support from, number one is the fact that the Ethiopian American diaspora is recognized as a change maker. These are people who actually make a difference, who we should pay attention to, is one of, I would call one of the most successful accomplishments. Now we know we exist here. And number two is we not only made them understand that we exist, but we also made them know that they can't ignore us. And the first 9 months we were totally ignored. They didn't even recognize what we were doing. And after the Virginia election, and then following many other campaign supports activities we did, when I say we did, I'm talking about the entire Ethiopian American community in the different parts of the country who came together to really make a difference. And then I would like to take this opportunity actually to really express my sincere appreciation for every organization, every Ethiopian group that listened to a call that we made, and he sent and reacted and acted accordingly to make a difference in the political discourse of this country. So it has been a long journey. I think I would say the Ethiopian American community is organized. I would confidently say that they know that we mean business. They know that we are going to go out and vote. I hope everybody will go out and vote, because now people are expecting, or at least we have created the perception that this is a damn serious issue motivated voter group, voting group. So, well, we have neutralized as many legislations as possible. We have neutralized as much of the media base as we can. And then at this point, we are in a position to actually fight back, and then we are doing that every single day.
Yeah, I want to ask you about a picture I recently saw with New York Congressperson Gregory Meeks in just a minute, and what that means and how that happened. But first, Yapsara, speaking of making a difference and mobilizing, you were a part of mobilizing the community in Virginia and even the Washington Post. And if they recognized it, it's because they just couldn't ignore it. Even the Washington Post said Ethiopian Americans may have turned that state red, and this may be something that other states and politicians should be watching. So what was that like? How intense was the mobilization, and how have you guys been able to build on that for the upcoming midterms?
Yeah, so with regards to the Virginia gubernatorial election, we were very intentional that we could have a protest vote and that will be seen and heard. But we have attempted to reach out to the Democratic candidate. We really genuinely try to put our causes across, to make them hear us and really support our cause, because what happens in Ethiopia back home is very, very important to us. And in our efforts, we learned that we were not taken seriously. Our votes were really taken for granted. And it was not the expectation that we would mobilize in the gravity that we did. Therefore, as we got closer to the election day, we really, really were intentional to get the message across on who was serious about listening to our issues, listening to our plea to really be on Ethiopia's side. And that's what we got. And we were putting together events and inviting both candidates. We wanted to be a platform for all Ethiopian Americans to really make the decision, and for these candidates to reach the Ethiopian American community in different events so they can address us and our issues here in the US and back home. Therefore, we organized a lot. We went out to register people to vote at churches, at community centers. It was a lot of legwork and a lot of dedicated folks in this region who made this happen. And when it comes to election day, we did vote. A lot of Ethiopian Americans voted an unorthodox way, differently than they used to vote, which was mostly Democrat. But it was very, very, it was a pain for us to see that our cause back home was not being taken seriously here by the candidates, at the Democratic candidates. So we did vote, and I truly, truly believe that we did swing the vote. We were a significant portion of the vote that went to the Republican in the different areas in Arlington and the different Ethiopian concentrated voter zip codes. So I truly believe that we did, but it was the mobilization at the churches. People who never voted before actually voted because it really, really mattered. And our foots on the ground, on doorsteps, it was just a lot of genuine work. And I think going forward as well, now a lot of activities are happening on the ground in California and different states that Ethiopian Americans are urging people to register, not just Ethiopian Americans, Eritrean Americans, Somali Americans. This is the Horn of Africa. What happens to Ethiopia affects the rest of the Horn. What happens in the Horn affects Ethiopia as well. So we are coming together as a community and we're mobilizing, and we are very, very serious being active participants of this democracy.
And what are one of the most common questions that you get in the field from people?
I'm not gonna vote because I used to vote Democrat, and they're just have dragged us into a deeper hole and have not helped Ethiopia. So I'm just not gonna vote. But what we've communicated to people, not voting is literally just having other people decide what you want for yourself. If you want to show that your vote matters, you're gonna have to vote for the cause that you are interested in, or a protest vote, just like we did. It was very, very hard for me to vote Republican. Extremely, I had to really, really convince myself, but it was ultimately about Ethiopia, about my community here as well, and what matters to me. So it was a lot of persuasion. I have friends who made hundreds and hundreds of calls, phone banking literally from their cell phones, and they were very dedicated. They talked to people, they answered their questions. They really got to personally, get to know people to make sure that they understand what it means to vote this way or the other way.
Yeah, and that issue of whether to just vote blanketly for Republicans, now that a lot of the community is really upset with this administration, is one that comes up a lot in the comments. I see it all over social media. Mesfin, this is something that we talked about, where people are so disenchanted with this Democrat administration rather, that they say they're going to just across the board vote Republican, and that is not something that AIPAC suggests, right? So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so AIPAC is recommending that we Ethiopian Americans at this point, for that matter, Eritrean Americans as well as Americans in the Horn, be an issue voter than a party voter. Honestly speaking, when it comes to foreign policy, the two parties have really no difference. I mean, we have seen it when the previous president served to Egypt to bomb the dam, and then the following new president, the current president, decided to accelerate that by 15 times, and we all know what they are doing at this point. So foreign policy is not something that it's really, these parties are the same when it comes to foreign policy. So therefore what we are saying is we are an issue voters, and at this point we feel that the party that's in power is really making significant damage to Ethiopia for whatever reason. We don't know why. We have tried to figure even what's happening in South Africa. I mean, what is going on? I mean, why is the State Department, the U.S. government, a high-level official so invested on saving an insurgency group that attempted to overthrow a duly elected government? What is the passion? Why so much passion? So it just begs a question. So what we're saying is we don't think this is right, and so people should make our recommendation on all the candidates that we identified, the candidates we endorsed, have been identified as one who actually agreed to support a pro-Ethiopia cause, pro-Ethiopia agenda, and for the most part disagree with what's happening at this point. So do we say people should go total on party line? No, that's really not what we are saying. What we are saying is let's be really be focused. Let's be issue voters, and on the national level, what matters, on the international issues like in Ethiopia, is the national offices. So when it comes to national office, U.S. Congress, senatorial, and in a way, gubernatorial candidate, not that much, but to an extent. Let's just make sure those votes are based on issues. What is the issue? The issue is this candidate pro-Ethiopia or against Ethiopia? Simple question. And we have vetted those guys from the ones who are running, who are pro-Ethiopia and who are not pro-Ethiopia. The guys we don't support are not pro-Ethiopia. Please don't vote for them. The people whom we have endorsed have said that they are open-minded. They would understand that they have to work with the Ethiopian American community. Let's go ahead and put them in office. And there is a lot of work that will be done once they are in office. But the most important thing is first, let's get them in office, and let's just make sure that all this what we are hearing, those totally, I can't even explain what's happening at this point from the U.S. government side. No explanation. All this craziness has to stop, and I think we can stop it. And the people whom we have endorsed have agreed to be part of an Ethiopian caucus. What people need to understand is when we have an the active Ethiopian caucus that will take place in this new Congress in 2023 will be chaired by Congressman Garamandi, whom I attended his fundraising yesterday in California, and who committed to be a vanguard and a guy who would always stand on because he was a Peace Corps there. He has attachment with Ethiopia. So he and then we also have a Republican partner that will be working with him, Chris Smith. But not only that, all of those 20 of the 22 candidates that are on our endorsed side, the ones who are actually in the United States Congress, almost all of them have agreed to be part of that caucus. Now, that caucus is going to be a very active caucus. We are going to push a pro-Ethiopia positive legislation in next year. It's not going to be, sanction Ethiopia. It's going to be how can we work? How can the U.S. government work with Ethiopia to expand trade, to expand, bilateral relationship? No, we are absolutely have zero interest to discuss aid, financial support. That's not what we want. So there will be a very well thought legislation that will be pushed, and then these guys will push it. So this is our country. This is a democratic process. There are all of us, 700,000, a million taxpayer American Ethiopians. We have every right to participate in the political process. We are expected actually to participate in the political process. We have to participate, and then participating means doing voting in blocks. When you are a million people, to make a difference, you just have to stay on the same lane. If you have 300 million, you can be all over the place, still do what you can do. In our case, stay in the same lane. Let's save the nation first. Let's have this ancient civilization that has lived for 3,000 years to live another 3,000 years, which it will, irrespective of whatever people are doing. But let us not allow. We don't even know why some bureaucrats to do what they are doing that only would help hurt not only Ethiopia. In our opinion, this is a very this is not just a simple opinion, but it's a strong belief that supporting Ethiopia, having a strong Ethiopia, is very good for the United States. Why?
Yeah. This Ethiopia caucus, is that a formalized thing that will be created next year?
So there is a caucus now. There has been an Ethiopia caucus, but it has faded away. It's not an effective caucus at this point, because the members have it hasn't been active. It was put together a few years back. So
is
now,
it an Ethiopia caucus or is it a TPLF caucus? It happened after the transition or before?
Before. No, it's not a TPLF caucus, but they infiltrated it, and then it just became a TPLF caucus. You can say that. So now with this new group that is coming in, that we are organizing to be in, it will be a strong pro-Ethiopia caucus, and it's going to be pro-Ethiopia by every sense of pro-Ethiopia. It's going to worry about the nation called Ethiopia. So and it's going to work as hard. And we will have a different segment of our membership, the Ethiopian American group in different parts of the state. Will have a different. Will divide responsibilities, and each one of us will have a role to play. We have to play our role. We'll have this conversation. We'll have this discussion as we go on. There is an AIPAC National Election Board meeting that meets every Thursday. And through that channel, we are going to distribute the responsibilities for every state and for every Ethiopian Americans living in a particular place, what their responsibility, what their duty is. So, as you know, already we have seen tremendous response. People are really acting on when requested. So we would coordinate it in that way, and so that we can have this caucus to be functional, meaningful, and then so the outcome is when somebody pushes, like this guy who pushed from New Jersey, who pushed 6600, nobody read that. Nobody read that thing. He pushed it. It came out on Friday. We heard about it on Saturday. So we tried to get to the legislation, and then we were reading it on Sunday. They called an emergency meeting on Monday, and then before the subcommittee reviewed the legislation, it passed on Tuesday. So that's what they did. Now, when we have a strong Ethiopian caucus, this is not going to happen. This is the caucus members are going to demand that anything that we got to get through the United States Congress has to be reviewed. Opinion has to be given from this caucus, and this caucus will be very well educated, people who are very well informed about the issues, and anything that comes out of the United States Congress is going to be well informed. We are not going to allow politically motivated individuals for various reasons. I don't want to go into any detail here, but for various reasons, to impact the lives of 120 million people. Not only that, we are not going to allow such characters to impact the interests of the United States, which negatively impacted when bad legislations are passed and affect that ancient nation, to the extent of breaking it down. So it's not good for us. It's not good it's not good for anybody at this point.
Right. And Senator Bob Menendez, who did author that 3199, has been pushing really anti-Ethiopia legislation throughout this entire conflict. And in the House, 6600, I believe either that one or 7311, which really limits the voices of the African diaspora, was written or sponsored rather by Gregory Meeks, Representative Gregory Meeks of New York. I do still want to ask you about him. I'm just going to keep kicking that can down the road. But I want to read a few comments to get both of you guys as reaction on this. And just for everyone that's just tuning in, we're talking about the midterms with AIPAC Executive Director Mesfin Teganu and Yapsir Zodi. We're just talking about what you need to know ahead of the November fourth midterm elections, how that can affect Ethiopia, what kind of work is being done to try to get to know candidates and politicians that are in office, and talk to them about what's going on in Ethiopia. So please like, subscribe, and share this link in all of your group chats that I know all of you have, whether it's WhatsApp, Twitter, and Facebook. And with that said, I'm going to read a few comments. There's a lot regarding just voting. Blue Pill says, the vote for lesser of two evils is still a vote for evil. Put a pin in that. I want to get Yavsar's response to that. Democrat or Republican, they're both cut from the same cloth, is what Kenneth said. Engage them and change their hearts and minds. A little bit different from Dave. And then Teddy says, there is no way in hell I am voting for Republican, but I would definitely stay home. Okay, there's at least two that are in the same wheelhouse. Lesser of two evils is still a vote for evil. Teddy says, forget it. No way I'm voting Republican. I would definitely stay home. I know, Yavsar, you've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but you know, what are your arguments to people? This is, by the way, after you made your case about why you should just vote, that these comments came in. So if there was a follow-up, if you were out in the field and you had to follow up, what would you say to add to what you had said earlier?
Yeah, so like Musman said, we're not saying vote Republican across the board. And we really should emphasize this issue voters that we are. Cuban Americans are a very good example, right? They're able to really put forward their cause and educate those either Republican or Democrats, and really have done that. AIPAC has have been successful in speaking with various policymakers, Republicans and Democrats, to really educate them about the issue in Ethiopia. Because in the beginning of the days, people had this very distorted idea of what's going on, who's on the people's side, who's on TPLF side, who's on the government side. It was just extremely chaotic. So we had to get the narrative straight first. So we, as AIPAC, went and knocked on these doors and talked to policymakers. Then there were doors that were not open. So we cultivated these relationships. We continue to educate. And at a point where we are now, we can clearly identify and see who are friends of Ethiopia and who are not, whether Republican or Democrat. So for me, and I can say personally, and I cannot answer for everyone, but if it's a Republican, and there are a ton of things that I don't agree with Republicans here and domestic policies, but if that Democrat is willing to, one, re-enlist Ethiopia into AGOA, that additional voice, and advocate within Congress, that gets me, an additional check mark for me to vote for them. If they are willing and open to engage with the Ethiopian community, to hear our causes and things that are important to us, that's another check mark. So AIPAC has also put together criteria of why AIPAC endorsed these candidates. And that's a really good document to also see on individually, why am I voting this way or that way? So for me, is those issues, are they going to vote against these resolutions and bills that we just discussed that are really going to affect the Ethiopian people, my relatives, my family, my friends on the ground? So these are issues that really matter to me. And if these policymakers and candidates are willing to be that voice, and that's what we lacked so far, we're going to get behind them, and I'm going to give them my vote. But of course, it is also a give and take. I might lose certain things that I don't necessarily agree with domestically, but for me, it really weighs. And I have seen so much struggle that we had to do to educate them, to swing them this way or that way for these bills and sanctioning Ethiopia and hurting the Ethiopian people. I would vote for those who are going to be serious about our country and us as a diaspora here.
And that's sort of the challenge of being from two worlds, right? We're equal parts American as we are Ethiopian. And so there is this having to balance domestic issues and foreign policy issues, which isn't necessarily the case for a lot of Americans. A couple of funny comments regarding having to vote Republican sometimes. Mandy says, I hold my nose and vote Republican this time. And then I don't know if they saw each other's comment, but Kasai also said, hold your nose and vote vote Republican. There's a very specific question that's come in that I want to present to you, Mesfin. It's along the lines of what we're talking about that I think it's worth for you to respond, because these are not the easy questions today. So, Orthodox says, written in Ge'ez, honestly, AIPAC is hugely endorsing the Dems, i.e. members affiliated with a party which has been consistently bleeding Ethiopia. Why does AIPAC favor Democrats? And before you answer this, Mesfin, I just want to let everybody know, if you are looking for help in terms of who to vote for different positions, go to AIPAC's website. We'll put that at the bottom, AEPACT.org, and there'll be a guide, a graphic with all their pictures there. But with that said, this is an interesting question. As Orthodox said, why are a lot of the people, a lot of the politicians that AIPAC endorsed Democrat?
Good. Okay, so let's get. There was one question which says, instead of trying to vote for Republican, let's work on changing hearts. Let me just say how the AIPAC endorsement process worked. The first is, if the candidate is Republican or Democrat, I mean, it doesn't matter. If the candidate, so AIPAC is not looking a candidate as a Republican or Democrat. In principle, the organization is a bipartisan organization which advocates for pro-Ethiopia agenda, irrespective of who you are or which party you belong. Now, with that context, so when we go through the process, the first criteria is, who is this candidate? Why are we interested in this state? Because it's a close call. There is a chance that this vote can go either way. So our vote matters. Okay, in that case, now who is currently the incumbent? Is easier to support incumbents if possible, and where does he stand? So now, if the incumbent is sort of indifferent or anti-Ethiopia, quote unquote, or if his actions are not pro-Ethiopia, then there is a significant effort we do to reach out to this person, to have a meaningful dialogue, to convince him or her that they should change their stand on Ethiopia, on what they do, on the issues. Most of them, the assumption is not everybody is educated enough to do what they are doing. And then we have seen that we have first-hand information why we say what we say. So most people are not educated, the elected officials, all that. So that effort is the first phase. We try again and again and again to make sure that we present our case, gets them to understand, don't support anti-Ethiopia legislations, or don't be anti-Ethiopia because the reason why you are is because maybe you don't know. So here are the facts. Please don't do it. Now, when that failed, when after several attempts, if that doesn't take us anywhere, now we get into the second option of, okay, so what do we do? So the election is coming. This person is stubbornly anti-Ethiopia. He has refused to even listen to the facts on the ground. Therefore, so we are going to recommend that we are going to endorse somebody else for the coming election. So that's the midterm election was determined in this way. When we do that, in the national office, if you noticed, I know this question says we have more Democrats. Yeah, there are more Democrats, but if you look at the national office, I think it almost is equal. It wasn't intentional, but when we followed our criteria and start to pick people, there are Democrats today who are fighting for Ethiopia. I mentioned Congressman Garamandi, and there is Congressman Panetta. These are Californians, and we have in the East Coast as well leaders that are really pro-Ethiopia, and who are still Democrats. So you want to make sure you have kept your relationship with these people, you continue to build your relationship with those people. So you don't abandon them because they are Democrats. So we are not going, again, please understand that we really don't care whether you are a Democrat or a Republican. We are making sure that a candidate has a value that we agree with when it comes to a pro-Ethiopia agenda. So that's the criteria. So with that, so we have picked about, I think, 7 or 8 Republicans or 7 or 8 Democrats for and for congressional offices, and then there are other endorsed candidates, gubernatorial candidates, as well as for local offices, and just I think most of them happen to be Democrats, and so that is the reason for the description, why it looks like the way it looks like. So it's not about party. We are absolutely, we have decided to be party blind at this point, because honestly, it doesn't matter. None of these guys seems to care for Africa, leave alone. So there is that thing. So that's how it was picked, just to make sure that everybody understands.
No, that's good. I think that's clear. And again, if you guys want any, information on who to vote for, I hope you are getting out and voting for the midterms on November 4th. You can go to AIPAC.org, which is at the bottom of your screen, and talk to everybody that you know and vote, especially if you're getting some help in figuring out who to vote for. So someone is doing the homework for you, so you don't have to do too much work. Yafsar, there's a comment that came in here. There's a couple of comments like this that basically says, U.S. foreign policy is anti-Africa. What does it really matter, who we vote for? So, I present that to ask, how do you find the balance between kind of knowing that the system is pretty screwed up, particularly when it comes to policy on Africa? I think a lot of people are waking up, including, people of African descent here in the United States. So when you're talking to people that are a little bit disenchanted in general and that don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, I mean, I don't know that any of us actually see the light yet, but some of us just believe it's there if we keep working at it and planting these seeds. So what would you say to people that said this is just, beyond our scope and nothing we do is going to make a difference?
Yeah, so as an Ethiopian American community, we have learned in the past 2 years how the U.S. Democratic system and foreign policy is extremely broken. It is purely for the U.S. government and interest. It doesn't necessarily see, especially the African continent and its people, as partners. Which is why we see a continuation of this aid rather than more of like a trade and investment type of relationship. Now we're seeing with Biden, but I have my doubts in terms of, is that a realistic challenge, or is it more of a rhetoric to put on pages? So for people who says, does it really matter? Just in and of itself, it's a very broken system, and their approach towards the continent is never going to change. I say it is because we are where we are now is because the folks that are in the back end supporting, campaigning, donating for the different campaigns of these candidates to get them to office. And we've seen a lot of TPLF support, a lot of TPLF money that went into the campaigns and support of these politicians. And of course, they are politicians. Their very number one concern is to get reelected and to remain in office and in influence. Therefore, they will stick to their supporters who got them to office, who continue to support their campaigns, who continue to support them, and personal relationships as well. So, and that's what we've learned. We were way behind in terms of catching up to see how this canvas have been drawn. And it was a lot of background work that got us to this point, and a lot of TPLF support. A lot of the politicians we mentioned today, a lot of congressmen, women, and senators that have significant support and money in the back of their campaigns. So what we have to do is we have to get in that system, and I think AIPAC it's kind of the first time Ethiopian Americans are officially within the already structured system of influencing politics in the US as Ethiopian Americans. We had our ways of voicing our concerns, demonstration, and others. But I think this is a very structured effort now and very coordinated within the already structured system where we are going about changing minds, changing policies, changing stance on the concerns on the continent and then Ethiopia. Especially as Ethiopian Americans, I think we have a significant leeway in influencing what other Africans would do. And a lot of African diaspora are very keen to know how to go about this. And I'm part of several African diaspora groups, and they're really looking at what the Ethiopian Americans are doing and how they're influencing, how they're voting, and the activities that we're doing. And I think AIPAC has really structurized and made it more of like, you know, the official way of others, how they've done it before to influence. And now we're going about that way. So I think we will, and like Mesfin said, Republican or Democrat, I think we will get to a point where we really matter. What we say is going to be taken seriously because we can get them out of office, or we're not going to get them in office. It's going to come down to that. And our politicians, that's one of the main concerns that they have because they want to get in office, they want to remain in office and be influential. And we've seen it, and I'm sure Mesfin can speak on it more, but we've seen that really happen. One day we were not taken seriously, and then another day we're making the Democrats very nervous, and they're coming now to really engage with us. So we've seen the paradigm shift already, and I just would like to give them some comfort here that it will change, and we will become that driving force behind driving these agendas.
Right, consistency is important, right? And you know, the fact that we haven't been doing this kind of work, the fact that AIPAC is new shows that, you know, what would it have been like, you know, if AIPAC was around 10 or 15 years ago? So 10 years from now, if we did nothing, we're going to say, oh, we wish we started 10 years ago, we'd be in a different place, because that's some of what we're saying now. Before I let both of you go, Mesfin, I've been meaning to ask you how that meeting with Gregory Meeks, Congressman from New York, went. Like I said, he is a sponsor of one of the bills that I thought was just very draconian in nature in terms of limiting the speech and almost criminalizing the speech of African diaspora. And so how did that meeting happen? And then what do you want to leave with people as we wrap up?
Well, I think what the Apsara said just a few minutes ago is what leads us to how that meeting happened and why it's important not to give up, not even giving up, not even to say why would this matter. That's exactly the reason why we shouldn't say that. So the meeting, we have been, you know, as you know, Harmela, we have been trying to get a meeting with him for some time to just have a conversation. So guys like him, for example, people who have 80% approval, and people who would be in the Congress for a long time, who are highly influential, are people that we would try to educate, get closer, and make our case as much as possible. This has been tried for a long time, and now we got an opportunity to put together an event for him, and we took that opportunity to put together an event, and through that we had good hours. I mean, a decent a couple of hours, more than 2 hours time with him to discuss who we are, why we believe what's being done is wrong, and why that should be corrected, and then why we should be listened. So our conversation was mainly, as you know, Congressman Mix is an African American. He has been in the Congress for many years, and he's in a position where he can make a difference in African politics. We feel that as elected leaders, leader of the from New York, as member of the Black Caucus, and as a chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, we made a plea to him that there is an opportunity that's being missed out. You could, there is, we all know that the West has issues with Africa. It's clear that the Western world still is struggling how to deal with Africa. And the last thing we want is, an African legislator not to be able to use his or her influence to fix that. So our conversation has gone really far from the issue on Ethiopia, and we have raised that conversation to be an African, a Black conversation. So at the end of the day, we have succeeded to have a very meaningful conversation to say that none of us want. Everybody wants peace in Africa. All of us are looking for peace in Ethiopia. Our ancestry land is that country. We still we have relatives there, so we can't. You cannot be more worried than me. If you are an American who have no relationship in that land, you can't be more worried than me, because therefore, if you want peace, I want peace too. But how to get to that peace has to be rationally discussed, not imposed in a way that's being imposed. It can't be all sticks. There has to be some carrots. So at the end of the conversation, he was very, very open to say, I'm fine. All I want, guys, is I would like the discussion or the peace process to bring peace to all 150 million people. And then we exactly told him that's exactly our wish as well. So our interest happened to really come in just we end up having exactly the same goal after about 2 hours of conversation. And so it was really, when the questions that somebody asked earlier, is better to try to change hearts than to go Republican. We absolutely agree with that. And this is one of those successful events. And it has happened a few times in the past, but at a higher level, at a level that he's in, at the kind of influence that he has. This was, I would say, the first successful attempt. And, it also talks, it's also is probably because of the fact that AIPAC has been now here for longer than a year. And we have been out mostly, making noise. The more you make noises, the more politicians listen. If you are nice, quiet, and sort of, that doesn't work for Washington, by the way. You just have to be really loud all the time if you're interested. So that's you guys know how TPLF is operating.
Right.
Yeah. So So it was more like the good old day, heart to heart, calm conversation, and we just were ready to bring this discussion to a higher level than you did this to us. How dare you? And then therefore, at the end, I think we have succeeded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a big deal. There's a lot of skepticism in the comment section about him, but I think it's a big deal that you guys had the meeting. Thank you both so much. Yapstra, before we wrap, one more, some quick thing to leave with people as we're heading into midterm elections.
No, I think everything has been said. Just please go out and vote. It really, really matters. And I've been talking to several Ethiopian Americans that are abroad, who are back home working in different countries across the continent. They can also vote in absentee. Please send in your votes. Make sure that we are heard and we're taken seriously. Our votes are not taken for granted. So I would just say, please do take this seriously. Early voting is still on. I believe it still goes on until November 5th. Please, you can still do go out and vote early if the voting election day does not work for you. But please exercise your rights as American Ethiopians. Please go out and vote.
Thank you both so much. A lot of really good questions that came in, and you guys answered them so well. AIPAC.org, AEPAC.org. Thanks for all the work that you do, and thank you so much for giving us your time on this Friday night.
Of course.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you guys next time. Enjoy the rest of your night, whatever's left of it.
Just one last comment
Sure.
before I go. I have a comment, and I would like to say, everybody, this program, such programs are the programs that we have now. The commercial media, the Western media, none of that is telling our story. So let us support Eyes on Africa, Harbella TV. Please go in, log, sign in, and be a member, and let's make sure that our voice is heard. www.eoanews.com.
Thank you. I pat your back. You pat my back. It's a community over here. Thank you both so much. Enjoy your night. We will see you next time.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure. All right. Well, that was the first half of our program. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for all the comments and really good questions, some really tough questions that you guys put in. We do have another segment where we're going to be talking to Simon Tesfamariam, Nebiu Asfaw, and Yerus Kubret, all off Twitter. All of their accounts are suspended, and then I believe in all of their cases is permanently suspended, and none of them know why. In the case of Simon and Nebiu, they've been suspended for over or nearly a year now. So we're going to talk to them as to how far they've been able to get, were they able to get anywhere, and what you can do now with Twitter, now that Elon Musk has decided to buy the company for $44 billion. For those of you who don't know, Elon Musk is really big against censorship. He's been talking a lot about the way Twitter does their censorship. And so we will be talking to them in just a minute. While we're getting ready for that, please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this link so that everyone can join in on the second part of the conversation. This one's going to be interesting. We're also going to talk about the war in Ethiopia, what's happening on the ground, what may be happening around the peace talks, what we should be looking for, what we should be ignoring, and how you can engage. So these are the top stories. Thanks for joining us.
The fifth of 7 days of Ethiopia peace talks have wrapped in South Africa. The African Union is set to be leading them. Mediating the talks are former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, and former South African Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Nguka. The United States and the United Nations are said to be observing, but State Department spokesperson Ned Price said this week that Special Envoy Mike Hammer would also be participating.
Our Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Mike Hammer, is in South Africa to observe and to participate in the AU-led talks.
Western media outlets also continue their pressure on the Ethiopian government in this conflict. Many admit the federal government does appear to have a military upper hand against the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels who ran a brutal 27-year regime that ended in 2018. The Ethiopian government has also struck back at Western media outlets, think tanks, and others that continue to levy uncorroborated allegations against it. In a statement, the state's communications service says in part, the government of Ethiopia can no longer tolerate the defamatory falsehood being spread against Ethiopia by various Western entities. It is shameful that they parrot TPLF's irresponsible propaganda. Some are jumping to rescue the group no matter what. It goes on to say the bandwagon of accusations and slander does not change the facts on the ground. And on the ground, the federal army continues to hold several cities in Tigray, with sources saying fighting continues around the region's capital city of Mekelle. And new from Ethiopia's Minister of Defense, Dr. Abraham Belai, who himself is from Tigray. Belai released statements in 3 languages calling on collective calm and a new mindset for Ethiopians from Tigray. The minister says in part, the serious crisis we're facing in Tigray can only be solved when our people themselves become a part of a solution with a new mindset. Outdated political party or ideology will not ensure peace, security, and stability for the people of Tigray.
All right, some interesting reactions from government officials in Ethiopia. We'll talk about that and some of the changes at Twitter and what we should be able to expect, or what can we expect, and how we should all engage with the changes at Twitter. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in my three guests, Nebiu Asfaw, Dr. Simon Tesfa Mariam, and Yerus Kubrat. Who is in a train station? No, I'm just kidding. sounds like somebody is in a tunnel. We'll see if that calms down. How is everybody doing? Thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate you guys taking the time on this Friday night. Is that whose headphones is that? I know we didn't get a chance to do tech. You guys hear that? Okay, it's Simon. It sounds like it's Simon. Hey, thank you guys both for making the time on this Friday evening. I know it was all happening last minute, but first of all, Yerus, you've been hacked off Twitter. I mean, you made it for a long time. You were one of the ones that got rounded up in the first round of censorship that happened around this time last year with Nebiu and Simon, and then you were able to come back on, but Nebiu and Simon have been off since. They don't really explain, right, in many cases, what exactly happened and and why it happened. So first, how far back has it been since you've been taken off Twitter, and what did they tell you?
So the first round was the same time when Nebiu and Simon was off, amongst with other pro-Ethiopian voices. And then the second time, just recently, about I want to say a week or so ago, they took it down. And it's really not, even the first time, there was really no reason, but I appealed it right away and was able to, they kind of just restored it without any explanation. And this time it was just the same, nothing. There was no prior communication or anything like that. It was just all of a sudden suspended. So I appealed it, but actually this time it says permanently suspended. And so I did appeal it and asking, if you could at least explain to me what the reason was, and if there is any rule that I have violated and stuff like that. So I reached out to them. So we'll see if they come up with some sort of reason or anything, but it just seems like it's more of a suppression of voice than anything.
Yeah, and Nebiu, you've been down for about a year now. I mean, they took us down. I'm still there, but they took a lot of the No More top accounts down with all of you together back in November after we had those massive rallies. So have you gotten any information from Twitter? Did you get any information when you were taken down initially?
Yeah, we're just approaching a year now. When my account was taken down, I was taken down on the same day as the No More Twitter account. They took us down together. It's a permanent ban. Just for the record, my Twitter account was established in 2009. So how many years is that, right? 12 years or so. I've never gotten a single warning. I've never violated a single law, rule, anything. My tweets have been very respectful and diplomatic, and so it just came out of nowhere. I was not given a warning. I was permanently banned, permanently, and they sent me an email saying that I'm permanently banned if that I'm not allowed to try to recircumvent this ban, and basically threatening more actions if I try to create another account. And they didn't really give me a reason on why that I was permanently banned without any warning. So I knew what was going on. There was a massive amount of targeted sanction, is what I call it, against no more movers, no more movement organizers. And the message was clear. This was a time when you had terrorist leaders like Getachew Reda, who are getting verified and getting the blue check mark on Twitter, while he was literally tweeting from a war zone. I remember around this time, the TPLF, he was, I remember a tweet where he was saying, "We're about to bomb Wazia," or some city, right? I think you might want to go and mute someone. I don't know if that's. So you have this TPLF warlords literally threatening to shell a town, to kill civilians openly, and they're not being banned. And here you have people like us, whose only sin was to say that the TPLF is a terrorist group, to speak the truth, to expose the lies of the Western mainstream media, to expose these lies that have made the victims victimizers and the victimizers victims. Our sin was to organize Ethiopians, Eritreans. Our sin was to organize Pan-Africans, pro-peace allies, and to come out and expose these lies. And that's how I see it. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even bother to appeal. Just so I never appealed to Twitter. That was my way of telling them, basically, my message, because I know people that have appealed never got a proper response, and I just waited, but so that's what happened. It's been about a year, but what I will say is that they thought that they silenced us, didn't realize there is millions of us out there, and that the movement only got stronger. And as we now are on the cusp of victory, that they were not able to take away our voice or our movement for our people's liberation.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was just so odd that they took down your personal account, that you're barely active. I think the first time that I realized, I mean, you're involved in so many different organizations around the country, but the first time I realized that you had that personal account was when it got shut down, because it wasn't something that you used very much. So it kind of, it just makes it even more questionable as to why you would take your account down anyway. So another one of our folks in here that have been shut down since last November, and interestingly enough, one of the Twitter execs actually commented on your suspension. Simon, welcome. Have you gotten anywhere with it? And I think you had like 80,000 or something like that followers when you got shut down.
By the way, thank you for having me on, Hudmi. Hey guys, good to see you again. I love your shirt, W. So yeah, it was super weird. What happened was that a Twitter spokesperson actually had to come out, make a statement, explain exactly the circumstances under which I was being banned. And the allegation, according to this said spokesperson, was basically that I was pushing spam and that I was manipulating the platform. And so it's funny because, this is coming right after exactly actually 1 week after our demonstrations, the global demonstrations on the 21st. So after everyone had got done eating their turkey, having a good time with their families, they, in the middle of the night, shut down all my accounts, and it was a permanent suspension. They attacked the New Africa Institute. They took down my personal account, my other accounts that I use for, I'm like a normal person. I have fun accounts that I use to go engage in other kinds of ways, just like everybody else. And, to say that I'm basically manipulating the platform by retweeting myself or doing this is totally ridiculous. We know it was politically motivated. And the nature in which it was done, in which they had just taken me down, and then have an official statement to do that, that came, by a Twitter executive or spokesperson. That was really a shock to me. I hadn't seen that coming. And I just thought of the consequences of that. And at that point I was, I gotta say, I was pushing about, I was just a guy on Twitter, honestly, I didn't have a huge following, early that summer, I want to say, like May, June, somewhere around there. I didn't have that big of a following, maybe like 2,000 followers, I think. And, by the time I got banned, it was up at, I want to say 36, 37,000. But at that point, each day I was getting about 1,500 followers. And it just looked like, whoa, like, there's a lot of people, starting to kind of pick up on what I'm tweeting here and this kind of thing. So they picked up on that and then immediately banned me. And I really do believe it was politically motivated.
So, now that we see a change in ownership of Twitter, and let's pull up Kenneth's comment to get us into the next part of this conversation. He says, that's why the establishment was so eager to keep Musk from buying Twitter. They knew he would open it up and not censor the users. So I want to start with you, Yaros, because this happened after you were suspended as well, the most recent suspension of yours. When you saw the headlines, did you think, oh, just maybe I'll be back on Twitter at some point, or had you already kind of given up hope since they were told, or you were told that it was permanently suspended?
Yeah, well, I was hopeful that actually others, including Nabiyu and Simon, but others that I personally know as well, will be able to come back to Twitter. And last week, actually prior to last week, I kind of noticed that a lot of the people I follow, including yourself and others, I wasn't seeing their feed on my page. And so sometimes I wonder, and I actually go into these individual pages to kind of say, okay, what's up, what's going on, kind of thing. A lot of organizations like AEPAC, even EAC, like some of these that I follow regularly were not showing up on my feed. And others also told me that my tweets are not showing up on their page. So I kind of knew something was off, but I just wasn't sure. I'm like, what's going on, sort of thing. But then last week, my account was suspended. So I was like, okay, well, this trick is still happening. And so I'm hopeful, but not really. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I read the tweet even today from him, but I don't know. I think it's maybe for the big people that have like huge followers and have been on the news and whatnot. But I don't know that it will cascade down to people that are targeted behind the screen per se, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what it actually means. I've spoken to some folks, inside sources at Twitter who also don't really know how this is gonna go. All just really concerned about any major changes. We saw Elon Musk getting rid of three top executives at Twitter just overnight, walks into Twitter headquarters with the kitchen sink, basically saying he's about to throw it all out and start over. But there was a statement that was put out today that may suggest otherwise. They're talking about putting together some sort of a body to determine how they do go about fielding or censoring voices that may be dangerous. Nabiyu, what about you? When you heard about that, the news that Elon Musk was now actually an owner, or the owner of Twitter, which is something that we've gone back and forth about, were you excited? Because he's definitely going to shake things up. We just don't know exactly what it would look like.
Yeah, I think any kind of shakeup is good. So I was excited. I'm happy to hear that somebody that's coming in empowered, ready to shake things up. How they're gonna turn out, we'll wait and see. But we've seen some indications that things will turn around. Elon Musk is saying that he respects First Amendment, and that the statement from him is that he bought Twitter because he felt like humanity needed a free space square where we could debate and exchange ideas. And that's really all we want. There's no logical reason to how Twitter censoring is occurring now, because there's so much filth on Twitter, guys. I mean, they even allow pornography on Twitter. There's so much crap on there. There's so much hate on there. I mean, literally, you have terrorists tweeting from battlefields there. And for them to politically target individuals who are pro-peace and are fighting for social justice, it really tells you that whoever is it may not be the whole company, may not even be policy, but the way that their policy was designed is that it opened the door for manipulation and for silencing of certain voices that were not welcomed. And another curious thing is that, there's been testimonies and hearings in Congress, for example, where this was, in fact, the last November, where the Assistant Secretary of State was in front of Congress testifying that they're working with social media companies like Twitter and Facebook to essentially monitor activities in Ethiopia and Eritrea, right? And this is the time when they were cracking down on people like us. And by the way, it's not just Twitter. Our Facebook accounts have been slowed down. I have a YouTube account that was shut down. You know what I mean? So it's in other places as well. So are the social media companies independent, or are they can they be censored by command or by request from the government when you're speaking truth that may expose some not so good work that's being done by the government? At the end of the day, our aim as voices of the people is to speak to the American public, to speak the truth, because the media is not telling the truth, because the media is playing games. And just today, I want to, share a quick story from this morning. There was some pranksters who pulled a prank in San Francisco, pretending to be employees who got fired from Twitter. There was major tier one media there reporting it as if it was true. Bloomberg, AP. I mean, these are, major respected organizations reporting a major breaking news, saying that they just talked with two engineers from Twitter, and these guys were just pulling a prank. This is what the TPLF is doing, and they're reporting it. But the difference is that the lives of Ethiopians is not a prank. It's not a joke. They're playing with real lives. And for us to be able to expose that, is basically using our constitutional right. As American citizens, we have the First Amendment, and we have the right to exercise it. And infringing upon that, when we're peacefully exercising our right, is really a violation of our constitutional right. And it is a violation of the American public's right to hear the truth. And that's how I see it. But I am really, truly hopeful that there is a shift coming, because some of this cancel culture that's being driven by these institutions is just getting out of hand. And I could tell you most Americans are getting sick and tired of it. So, hopefully, I'm hoping that with Elon Musk acquiring Twitter, that will bring in a new chapter in the public discourse and how we exchange ideas freely and peacefully.
Because let's actually break it down in terms of what Twitter chose to shut down and what it chose to keep up when it comes to the Horn of Africa. So on November 3rd, or the overnight, November 3rd, November 4th, 2020, when the Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels attacked the army base in northern Ethiopia in the Tigray region, simultaneously, there was a social media campaign, the hashtag Tigray Genocide campaign, that was launched by the very people that actually attacked that army base and provoked and started actually this war. And if I was at Twitter, and if I was objectively trying to limit any sort of violence or the incitement of violence, I would take a look at that and maybe not initially shut it down or curtail it. But after some time has gone by and you realize the very people that started this are actually in support of this group that started this war, and the government is actually responding to them. And so how can it be that this is a genocide, particularly when there's no data at all. There's sloppy overnight reporting that makes allegations of mass killings, much of it reporting done over the phone, and then we find out later that the sources are often the activists for this rebel group that started this war. So the fact that Tigray genocide was allowed to live for so long, I believe, has done a lot of damage both on the ground and here in the diaspora, whether it's in terms of, broken communities because people actually believe that initial campaign, because it's so cynical that it's almost difficult to believe that these activists and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, who they support, would claim something like that after they had actually started the war. Whereas #NoMore was saying no more to those kind of false propaganda that was dividing our communities, that were actually feeling conflict on the ground. And that was essentially the trends were disabled in Ethiopia days after the #NoMore was trending on Twitter. Yoel Roth, who I believe is in charge of Twitter safety, was the one who announced it, and really didn't give much reason except for safety reasons. But when you look at those two hashtags, one is pro-peace and the other one is clearly on the side of those who started this war. So with that said, Simon, before we move on to what's happening on the ground in terms of the peace talks, the way the Western media is continuing to paint this conflict, and I want to get you guys' take on some of it. What do you think that people should keep in mind, Simon, in terms of the censorship and how to operate on Twitter?
I really think that we have to keep pushing. I want to draw attention to the fact that when we say no more, it's not saying, we want less, we want a little bit, we want 50%, we want 20%. No more is very clear. We want it all done. And that's important to understand exactly what we mean by that. That means that, there are all these different tactics that are being used, people trying to negotiate with that message. That, you should, maybe give concessions here and there. We, the people of Africa, of the world who want progress and humanity to reach a higher stage of development, we're saying no more. We're saying no more to all the exploitation. We're saying no more to all the systems of exploitation. And this is encapsulated in that hashtag. And we've been using that hashtag to help organize us and to become more politically awakened. In fact, I want to draw attention to that phrase, political awakening. Back in, I believe it was the late 2000s, Zbigniew Brzezinski actually said that for the first time in history, there was a global political awakening. And really, I think what he was referring to was to mass media, to social media, and, not knowing how to control this beast. And really, the people have found a way to organize on these platforms, which now are dominated by big tech. Doesn't matter, it's this one billionaire or that billionaire. I don't think we should be rejoicing in that fact. I don't believe it should be these public squares, as Mr. Musk calls it, should be dominated by a private entity. It should be, it's a public square, so it should be something that's, shared by all, owned by all, but unfortunately it's not. And so we are at the mercy of the whims of, the very rich and the very powerful. And, when the ruling class, is contradicting one another and, at war with one another, as it appears to be at this current moment, we have to, ourselves on the other end of the spectrum, become more united. As they fight, we become more united. And we should be able to come together under this hashtag and grow this movement and continue to be resolute in the message of no more, not giving in, not giving concessions. We are the people. We are not any particular government. And sometimes certain governments can't say certain things, but the people can express themselves however they want. And our message is very clear. If you talk to the people on the ground in Ethiopia, You talk to the people on the ground in Eritrea. You talk to the people in Somalia, in the Horn of Africa, Sudan, South Sudan, Djibouti. The people are fed up and they're expressing it. They're saying no more. And so we have to be the expression of the people. And so sometimes when governments are light about certain things because, politics is played a certain way, we can be more forthright. We can be more direct, more bold, more audacious. And I think that's what we have to do when we're on Twitter. Don't hold back. And I just want to say, by the way, for everyone that has been standing up for us, all of us that are censored, I really want to thank you. I got a lot of messages today from so many different people. And I haven't had a chance to get back to all of them, but I sincerely am very thankful, and I will get back to everyone in due time. I know it's the same for everyone when they heard the news. We remain hopeful. I don't want to antagonize Elon. He has different ideas than I do, different than a lot of us. He'll do the right thing in this situation and allow free speech to truly be free speech. So keep up the resistance is my message for everyone, and don't never give up, never kneel down.
Thank you. And I'm trying to load the Twitter prank. We're going to see if we can get that going. And I want to play that a little bit. I think you guys have saw it earlier. And this just really speaks to, I think, how easy it is to go with literally a fake story. As Nebi mentioned, there was a lot of mainstream media outlets that were at this event. I haven't gotten a chance to completely scan it through. So we're just going to all watch it together, and then I want to get your reaction afterwards, beginning with yours.
I just got let go. I'm a data engineer. We've been having a lot of problems, and apparently Elon just came in and pulled the plug on the whole team.
Climate change. How are you feeling?
Terrible. I feel really bad. I feel really shitty.
How are you let go?
My director came by in person and did it, which I did appreciate, but it was definitely, it was to a group of us.
How long have you worked at Twitter?
6 years.
And what's your opinion on Elon Musk in general and what he's doing here?
I mean, I own a Tesla, and I don't know how I'm going to make the car payments now. Like, I generally respect Elon Musk. Obviously, some of the stuff he said lately is concerning to me. But, yeah. Now I'm really worried. It's really the culture shift. There's a lot of people that were leaders and, things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know those people are going. It's going to be a different Twitter in a week.
Elon Musk has spoken a lot about making the platform more free speech, in his own words. What do you make of that? What do you think Twitter will look like?
I mean, if free speech is, Nazis saying that, trans women shouldn't, use women's locker rooms, then awesome. I guess mission accomplished. We'll see. Listen, I got to touch base with my husband and wife. I got to get out of here, all right? Thank you, guys.
What's your name?
Sorry. Daniel. Thank you.
Your last name? What's your surname?
All right, that's it's on a loop. So if you guys don't know what we just saw is what appear to be legitimate mainstream media outlets, major media outlets approached this person who pretended to be a Twitter employee that had just gotten fired. As far as I know, only 3 top executives had gotten fired, so they must have thought he was one of them, possibly. Iris, have you seen this video?
No, actually, this is my first time seeing this. So it's hilarious. I mean, but I'm kind of glad. I feel like we need more of these, just because, like, I don't know, people are now more awake than they were before. But some people still have a hard time believing when you tell them that these, especially when it comes to Africa, that they don't even give it a drop of attention to actually dig into what they're reporting on. If I go up or call somebody and have a connection somewhere in this mainstream media, and I come up with some crazy story, they're going to run with it. They're not even going to pause to actually see, let's find another person to kind of verify, or, you know, let's go on the ground. None of that. And so when that happens here, where they actually have like google.com, you know, to see who are the managers that were fired, you know, I'm sure you can find their name, their address, everything is on the internet. But they go on, come up with this type of thing. I think it helps awaken some people that are still questioning, well, is it not, you know, in that gray area. So I would love more stories like these, because I think they expose the very thing that we're trying to people to pay attention to. So
I think you make a good point. I mean, this is a very accessible story. These are literally executives of major social media platforms. So it's not hard, it's not difficult to figure out who they are, what they look like. And I'm curious, just as a journalist and as a producer that's worked in those spaces, at what point they realized that they had been pranked. Is it after they got back to the studio and they're writing the story, or did somebody, one of the many outlets that appear to be there, actually catch it? Nevi, what did you think?
I mean, the story ran for a couple of hours before they realized that it was
Oh my
a joke.
gosh.
Yeah, and even the names that they gave him was a name from a science fiction. So for people who follow certain kind of genre, they know what the name meant. So you know, it was a complete prank. But it's terrifying, guys. It is terrifying because you have this are global media companies that tell the world what is happening, and these are media companies that shape the minds and thoughts of millions of people. I might even say billions of people around the world. And to see how lax they are with facts, and how they don't have a process in check, and that, you know, in the days of disinformation, where a major media company like AP and Bloomberg can be on the street corner reporting a fake story as if it's real. And these are the companies that are reporting on the lives of Ethiopians. And they're sitting in their office in New York reporting on a situation on the ground in Tigray with no idea, based on unnamed sources, right? And these stories are what's basically shaping public opinion. These stories are what is literally is shaping the minds of congressional representatives who are designing laws and public policies that affects real scenarios. This is how they've, you know, the wars have been happening for the last 50 years, from the Iraq, you know, WMD, weapons of mass destruction story, where the media pushed it until the war broke out, and over 1 million people have died since. Whether it's the Libya story, where the media pushed that there was a genocide happening, that they literally pushed stories that now we know are fake, about Libyan soldiers taking Viagra to rape Libyan women. It was completely fabricated stories. Just today, NPR reported a story of a Tigray hospital being destroyed, and they used a picture from Amhara region, from Wallo, of a hospital destroyed by TPLF. One of the 3,000 hospitals in Amhara that TPLF destroyed, the picture was used today as if the Ethiopian government destroyed a hospital in Tigray. This is what they're doing. This is how dangerous it is. And the whole reason that this war in Ethiopia has even lasted for 2 years, I would go even further to say it's because of the media, that they've tied the hands of the Ethiopian government. They can't do anything because, you know, stories like this are coming out. Sanctions and threats are happening based on these fictitious stories. And the TPLF, being the master of manipulation, the master of, you know, propaganda and mirror image propaganda, have played this media as like a football really well. And you know, with all this going on, if there should be any censoring, it should be censoring itself. The media censoring itself, its process, its auditing how it acquires news and how it distributes it, instead of coming after citizens like us who are exercising their constitutional right to tell them that, hey, this is wrong. What you're reporting is wrong. This is the truth. We know the truth because we're from that place. We're from that region. We have families there. We have people there we talk to. We have experience. We have real stories. That gets you banned. But things like this is encouraged and it's commercially rewarded.
Yeah, I think that what just happened there is really going to give life to the whole idea of fake news. I mean, you can tell by that person's politics that they're on a certain political leaning, and so I'm just shocked to find that it aired for any amount of time at all. I'm just curious to see if anybody got fired. That's the kind of thing that would get you fired. But maybe if everybody did it, or if a lot of outlets did it, then you can't really fire everybody. Simon, I want to bring you in here. Eritrea has been really a huge, target of disinformation. And you have the New Africa Institute.org, which did a really long paper on the disinformation campaign of the Tigray People's Liberation Front in Ethiopia, which is also fired into Eritrea. And that campaign, the Tigray genocide campaign, is really like the epicenter of some of the disinformation on Eritrea. So can you talk about that as it relates to, how can you help people navigate the disinformation that is out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's enormous amounts of disinformation, and actually, disinformation is sort of a buzzword nowadays. But I mean, really, what we're talking about is lying, right? I mean, it's just the common language of the people. It's lying, deception. It's another word we can use there, but it's as old as humans, and so the thing is how do we parse all this data in the age of information? And so the thing is the truth is something that you really have to sift through all this information, and I think we could use logic, we could use rational thinking and all this kind of stuff to discuss these issues and debate them and figure out what's truth, what's not true. But what happened, but what happens is that deception is necessary in order to exploit people, and so there are those who by necessity have to lie. The people do not have to lie. The people want what is just. People don't want to be exploited, and because people are being exploited, and this war by TPLF is one where they'll always hide. First of all, they'll hide even the term TPLF. It took us a while to get them to even say TPLF, right? And it eventually got out there in the public consciousness. And then after that, to then say TPLF has this secret agenda. First of all, the second part is to say that TPLF was in power for the last 30 years. People don't know that. When they say Tigray genocide, they don't talk about, well, this is the group that was already in power. And they then are trying to come back to power in a coup. Not only that, the third part then is these people are trying to have this crazy agenda where they want their own ethnic enclave nation. And not just within the borders that exist at the current moment, which were created against the wishes of the Ethiopian people back in '95, but they want to expand their borders to reach the Red Sea, go into other ethnic lands, historic, ancestral ethnic lands of other peoples, Afar, Amara, and all this stuff. And so you have a huge issue. All this stuff is being hidden from all the people of the world. And so it's our job to change the narrative. This is a battle of competing narratives. And the report by the New Africa Institute was designed to focus in on this issue and to simply question that narrative, And so I think the More movement is something where, because they will not listen, they won't read whatever you write, they won't read every single tweet and take it seriously. And so what you have to do is you have to demonstrate, right? So people went out into the streets and demonstrated. So the information that we put out, whether it's New Africa Institute, whether it's a tweet, it has to be brought together as part of some greater movement to get people to mobilize on the streets and to express themselves. And that's exactly what happened. And people expressed themselves. And this became a Horn of Africa movement. We're expanding to a Pan-African movement and now a global movement. And at the heart, you mentioned Eritrea. I want to say that Eritrea has been a target of entities that want to exploit and conquer Africa. Because if you look, I mean, how many countries out there are dependent on security from outside powers? Africa, virtually all of Africa at this current moment is dependent on outside security support. And this is with the exception of Eritrea. And those certain entities that want to exploit the region, they see that, and what do? They target Eritrea. It's for a very long time served as a threat of a good example. And Ethiopia now is saying no more. The people are saying it. The government is saying it. Everybody's saying it. And so now you have this growing partnership between Eritrea and Ethiopia and Somalia. You had it in Somalia, continues to even grow in Somalia among the people. I have these conversations with Somalis regularly. And, you know, they're building the structures and the institutions to resist. And so this movement is really, it's going to grow, and we have to keep pushing, you know, information and question the narratives and fight the disinformation, otherwise known as lies. So I don't know what more to say, but I think that we're really headed in the great direction. So everyone just keep the course.
So we want to segue a little bit. We've talked about TPLF and just the disinformation campaign with them. I want to replay the little summary of what has happened lately with the Western media attacks, how the Ethiopian government has responded. The recent comment from the Ethiopian defense minister that was to all Ethiopians, but then he did what appeared to be a separate one in Tigrinya that was appealing to Ethiopians from Tigray all over the world to really have a new mindset is what he called it, to really come together and find a solution, and what we can glean from that, if anything, in terms of how the talks might be going. So let's listen to that, and we'll come back and go around and get your reactions, and we'll wrap.
The fifth of 7 days of Ethiopia peace talks have wrapped in South Africa. The African Union is set to be leading them. Mediating the talks are former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, and former South African Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Nguka. The United States and the United Nations are said to be observing, but State Department spokesperson Ned Price said this week that Special Envoy Mike Hammer would also be participating.
Our Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Mike Hammer, is in South Africa to observe and to participate in the AU-led talks.
Western media outlets also continue their pressure on the Ethiopian government in this conflict. Many admit the federal government does appear to have a military upper hand against the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels who ran a brutal 27-year regime that ended in 2018. The Ethiopian government has also struck back at Western media outlets, think tanks, and others that continue to levy uncorroborated allegations against it. In a statement, the state's communications service says in part, the government of Ethiopia can no longer tolerate the defamatory falsehood being spread against Ethiopia by various Western entities. It is shameful that they parrot TPLF's irresponsible propaganda. Some are jumping to rescue the group no matter what. It goes on to say the bandwagon of accusations and slander does not change the facts on the ground. And on the ground, the federal army continues to hold several cities in Tigray, with sources saying fighting continues around the region's capital city of Mekelle. And new from Ethiopia's Minister of Defense, Dr. Abraham Belai, who himself is from Tigray. Belai released statements in 3 languages calling on collective calm and a new mindset for Ethiopians from Tigray. The minister says in part, the serious crisis we're facing in Tigray can only be solved when our people themselves become a part of a solution with a new mindset. Outdated political party or ideology will not ensure peace, security, and stability for the people of Tigray.
So Yurish, I want to go to you first. You know, we've been fighting this fight for a very long time. You far longer than I. Just sort of big picture. how do you see the way that the TPLF has been acting at this point, activists, TPLF activists in particular, and the West's role in the ongoing so-called peace talks that are happening in South Africa?
Well, I think it's been a while. And I think from the get-go, for myself, the call has been trying to bring the people together and let's leave the instigators out. I think the Western media and all of their, whether senators that support them or other parties, are instigators amongst that are inserting themselves into a family's conflict and igniting it and continuing to flame it. And so TPLF, they can deny it all day, every day. We know who they are, not just Ethiopians, the entire Horn of Africa and beyond know who TPLF is and what's been doing for the last 30 plus years, whether in Tigray and then in Ethiopia and beyond. Somalia, Eritrea, everybody they've exposed themselves to a certain extent. And so the solution still remains that TPLF must be disarmed and that we do need a new way of thinking and a way of thinking for all Ethiopians, and trying to come up with a solution for everybody. And the society have to choose to not be used as a weapon, or our political views, our ethnicity, our language, to not be used as a weapon for different political groups. And I think that's a choice, was you mentioned earlier, that the society have to make together. And so I'm hoping for a better future for all Ethiopians, and I'm hoping that this is coming to an end.
Yeah, a lot of people are really watching these peace talks, which are going to go through Sunday. So there's 2 more days of it, and just wondering what, if anything, is going to come of it. I was reading an article from one of the Western media outlets where they were conceding that the Tigray People's Liberation Front had a disadvantage on the military front and that the Ethiopian government had an upper hand. But essentially, we're saying this all really comes down to whether the Ethiopian government will accept another humanitarian ceasefire. Nebiu, what do you think are the chances? And I know a lot of this is speculation that the Ethiopian government would concede to a ceasefire. How do you see these talks and what they're really about, and how should the community process the information that we're getting from the Western media outlets, and then some of the stronger language that we're also seeing from the Ethiopian government?
Yeah, I think it was The Economist today that did that article about the TPLF, not having the military advantage anymore. But I think it's crystal clear by now that there's been enough pattern in this 2-year-old war to know what exactly the TPLF wants and what it would do if it was given another opportunity for a ceasefire. There's been 3 different attempts. I mean, forget about all the attempts to have a peaceful transition before they launched the war in 2020. I'm talking about after the war started, whether it's in June of 2020, and November and January, and the most recent one that they broke. Every single time that there was a humanitarian ceasefire or truce, and that the guns were silenced, the TPLF used that time to regroup, to rearm themselves, to steal UN trucks, to steal aid, and to launch the war again every time they've attempted to take over and do a regime change. So it's crystal clear by now, every time that they get that opportunity, that they're going to come back with an offense. Now, who has paid the price for that? The people of Ethiopia. Who has paid the price for that? Particularly the people in Amhara and the people in Afar, who were invaded by this force for 5-6 months and who were massacred, gross atrocities. It's the people of Ethiopia that have suffered for the kind gesture that the Ethiopian government has given, for the concessions that it's made, including the releasing TPLF officials like Subhat Nagga and others. That has really costed this government its support and even I would say the unity amongst our people. So much has been paid, so much price and sacrifice have been paid to give the TPLF an opportunity for peace, an opportunity to take the olive branch. And every single time they've seen it as a weakness, and their handlers from the West, every single time a concession was made from the Ethiopian government, they wanted more and more and more and more. It's ceasefire. It's, the next thing you know, I mean, after everything that they wanted was met by the Ethiopian government and they conceded, at the anger of the Ethiopian people for making these concessions, they still would not stop. It's like, oh, you got to turn on electricity, turn on the cell phones, internet. I mean, everything. It was nonstop. So it's very clear that if the Ethiopian government doesn't realize it by now, giving concessions and trying to appease these people, one, it's costed us dearly in life of our people, and two, it causes the government the support that it had from the people. So at this point, I don't think there's an option to back down. I don't think there's an option to concede anymore. And that is what we're witnessing from the Ethiopian government. And that is why we're seeing all this convoluted allegations and pressures coming from the media, from Canada, from the US. I mean, it's like a storm coming down, right? But at this point, from what I see, is that the government is staying put. That they get it and that they're fighting back, that they're not being pushed over anymore, and they're speaking back. And the more they do that, the people are roaring, coming behind them and saying, we got your back. We have you. When you have 120 million people plus the Horn of Africa, you include Eritrea, Somalia, the whole Horn of Africa is as big as Western Europe combined. This is not a small region. You have a whole region behind you, and it's time to finish the job. It's time to go through with it, regardless of what the media is saying, regardless of what all these institutions are saying. That saying, the dogs will bark, the camel keeps going. That's what needs to happen right now. The people are united once again. And if we do this, I think we will see a military victory, and that I think this negotiations, if that's what it is, will be a negotiation for the TPLF to negotiate the terms of their surrender.
And to your point, Nebi, Umeti says immediate cessation of hostilities equals give TPLF a chance to rearm and attack a fourth time. When is it going to be enough? I think that is the concern for a lot of people. We've seen TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels, break 2 different ceasefires, and that's after starting this war in November 2020. So the concern is if there's any cessation of hostilities on the part of the Ethiopian government, they're only going to use that space to regroup. And every time they regroup and launch, there's always some civilians that get caught up in the attack. Often the last 2 times they've done it by invading the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions. Before I come to you, Simon, I just want to remind everybody to like and subscribe and share this link. A lot of us watch channels and don't subscribe. I am so guilty of it. So if you look at your subscribe button and it is not clicked, please hit that. And so as we're wrapping up, Simon, I want to read a couple of comments to you that have come in about this war. The first one being, the question is, what is going to happen after Sunday, after the meeting is over? Does TPLF fly to Mekelle or Toronto? And it's Uzi Pistol that says 100% sure that the negotiation is not going to work. So what does it mean for the negotiation not to work? Let's walk through all the potential scenarios, because this is just my perspective, but I do not think this is going to be a black and white victory very soon. I think there may be a particular point that we get to, whether it's they get control over Mekelle or whatever the case, but I do think this is going to be a process. However that might come to you. So what are the potential avenues coming out of these peace talks, Simon, and what should people be keeping in mind in terms of what could come next, whether it's in the form of sanctions, what should people in the community be keeping in mind and bracing themselves for, if anything?
Well, we should understand that these negotiations are actually, even though it's said it's between TPLF and the Ethiopian government, we know this is negotiations between Ethiopia, the Ethiopian government, and the U.S. Or their proxies, wherever they want to, go with this. So really, even we can go back and say that the very war, why was it started? This is not just a war of TPLF. We have to talk about who was pushing TPLF to do what they did. TPLF versus the people of the Horn of Africa. And now, because TPLF really has no bargaining power, they're totally defeated, totally isolated. And the fact that they're universally hated, and again, this is not the people of Tigray, this is TPLF, a tier 3 terrorist organization, according to the Department of Homeland Security, is an entity that is, not wanted and being expunged by the Horn of Africa. And so these negotiations being between the U.S. and Ethiopia, we have to understand what Ethiopia wants and what the U.S. wants. The Ethiopia and the Ethiopian people want sovereignty. I think I can say that with confidence by the message that we saw from the people demonstrating on the streets of multiple cities in Ethiopia by the millions, that there is a deep desire for Ethiopian sovereignty. The same feeling in Eritrea, same feeling in Somalia, same throughout Africa. And you're seeing what's going on in Mali, what's going on in Burkina Faso. So this feeling, it has to be expressed, within these negotiations. I really, honestly, what it is now is the terms of surrender. How will TPLF surrender at this point? Are they going to go back to Mala now? Is that what's going to happen on Air Force One? What are they going to do? So it's totally a joke. And when we understand really where the balance of power is, then we understand that that's the issue. So what's going to happen is basically, again, the U.S. wants to continue this relationship, this exploitative relationship, this very imperialistic, this very neo-colonial type of relationship that had existed between Ethiopia and the U.S., between Africa and the U.S. And so that's a contradiction between what the people want in Africa and what the U.S. wants. And so that's going to lead to inevitable clash. And I don't think the people are going to relent on this. And so what that means is, and I hate to say it, but it's just the truth, is the inevitability of U.S. aggression, U.S. resisting the people's fight for sovereignty. And people have to understand that. And I want to repeat it, the inevitability of that. We can think that, we don't want to be cynical and say that, it's impossible that that the U.S. will let up and all this kind of stuff. So you want to push and lobby and do all you have to do. All these countries try and appease, to reduce harm. But at the end of the day, it's like expecting to win the lotto, to think that that's going to happen. So we have to prepare. We have to create structures of resistance. Resistance isn't just words. It isn't just a tweet. It's building social movements that are based on practical material, have a practical material grounding, and so moving bodies, moving economies, developing structures among us, institutions among us of resisting, of being resilient. Resilience is really, it's not just an abstract thing. It has to be practical, and it requires the building of these structures among us. So whenever a crisis hits, let's say sanctions kick in, let's say that because it's feeling like an inevitable thing that sanctions are going to come. And so we have to prepare for this. We have to prepare for coming sanctions against each of the countries involved. And we've seen the incredible hostility towards Eritrea, in the lead up to these negotiations, quote unquote. So, it's in Ethiopia, is going to be next. I'll tell you this. what they do to Eritrea is a precursor to what they're going to do to Ethiopia. It is a canary in the coal mine. So I just want I want everybody to know that we have got to now understand from this perspective of the inevitability of aggression. We have to build those structures. We have to organize ourselves. And so we can have a broader discussion about that. But just expect that these negotiations are probably not going to go the way the U.S. wants, and therefore we're going to see some aggression.
Yes. I mean, it's 5 days in, and I mean, there's no word at all about what's going on the ground. You just see, it really does feel like it's the U.S. government versus the Ethiopian government. Go ahead, Simon.
I just wanted to add one thing there that's very important. Look at Haiti. Okay, look at Haiti, the 1804 revolution. The message that sent to all the world that we don't want slavery. They got rid of slavery. There's slave masters in Haiti. To this very day, they are being punished for doing that, for that revolutionary action that inspired the rest of the world, all of us on the African continent. And to this, we're seeing it in the UN right now, and what they're trying to do, and they're trying to find a way to go into Haiti. And the thing is, look at what's going on in Canada. Canada looks like is serving right now as the good cop. Good cop, bad cop. At the end of the day, they're still cops. And it seems like the Canadians are being pushed to drive this new process. And so there's talk now of Canada being involved in Haiti. Okay. And so at the same time that there's talk of Canadian involvement in this conflict. So there's the connection. You have this historic nation of Haiti. You have this historic nation of Ethiopia, who now are facing similar struggles, and Canada's kind of taking the lead. And so we have got to build structures that not only defend just Ethiopia, but defend all of Africa, defend the Pan-African world, including our brothers and sisters in Haiti. So when we build these structures, we build resilience. That's part of building resilience. So anyway, I really want to draw attention to that because it's all connected.
I'm glad you brought up Haiti because, Haiti's been going through a lot, particularly recently with the UN Secretary General just quite explicitly calling for an intervention there. And there's a lot of nuances in that story that you're not going to get in mainstream media outlets. But tomorrow, there is going to be a Twitter space on Daniela Benami, who is a Haitian American writer that I'll be able to post on my Twitter page in case you guys are interested in joining. And essentially, the topic is the latest UN Security Council vote in which Russia and China essentially vetoed the idea of UN troops invading Haiti. Something similar happened, not quite the same, but similar happened with UN Security Council meeting on Ethiopia last Friday, in which China and Russia vetoed a resolution on Ethiopia, which would have meant that the Ethiopian government would have to concede to a cessation of hostilities at a time where they had the military advantage on the ground. So many of these stories end up being very connected. I'm really curious to hear about, to learn about the Canada connection from the Haitian Canadians and the Haitian Americans that I've talked to. Canada plays a very sinister role in Haiti. In this case, in the Ethiopia case, on the surface at least, it appears that they may be playing a role where they're going to take the Tigray People Liberation Front leadership and give them amnesty. And so I guess what I'm hearing, you guys all saying is that the peace talks are going to just look like they have the last 5 days, as far as we know, and not much is going to come of it. But and I guess it's just a matter of being cautious. But I do think this might take some time, and the reason I think that is because of what the defense minister just said in terms of putting it out to Ethiopians from Tigray all over the world that they need to take part in the solution. So what I hear him say is just literally that for this to be a genuine solution, Ethiopians from Tigray would have to take a part in becoming a part of the solution. So, and I'm not the most optimistic when it comes to this, although anything is possible. And the reason I bring that up is regardless of what happens on the military front, I think this is a part that would need to be won to some degree for us to have some sort of a stability. I just want to get you guys' take on that before we wrap. Nebiu, what do you think of this idea that this could drag out, not because the TPLF leadership are in Tigray, whether they are there or not, I think only matters so much, but because there's so many cadres on the ground and folks that have been brainwashed, indoctrinated. I mean, I've talked to people who have family there that are hiding because they do not want to be a fighter with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, but their perception on the Ethiopian government, because it's been formed by the media outlets that are in Tigray and they do not have much exposure to anyone else, is also considers them as an enemy in some cases, is the word that's used on Tigray Media House. So you hear it repeated by some people on the ground. So what do you think about this idea that this might drag out a little bit?
I think that I don't think it will drag out, in my opinion. And I say that because there's already evidence that the people of Tigray are sick and tired of the lies that they've been fed. And that we're already seeing in these liberated areas, Ethiopian forces delivering aid that was hoarded by the TPLF for war. And it is clearly becoming evident for the people of Tigray on the ground who their enemies are. Electricity is being restored. Ethiopian electric authorities are working 24 hours to restore the infrastructure. So electricity will be back on, telephone will be back on, the internet will be back on. What that means is that the people of Tigray will be reconnected with the rest of Ethiopia, and they will be liberated to hear what all their other brothers and sisters in Ethiopia are saying, not just a selective, brainwashing that the TPLF has been feeding the people. And I will say this much. The last time around, when the Ethiopian government left Tigray and then the TPLF took over, remember that they went door to door and arresting and executing Tigrayans who they accused of helping the Ethiopian government for selling out or for, whatever the allegation was. They killed a lot of people. If there is anything that will drag out this transition, is fear from the people that this is not the final victory and that the TPLF might come back. If there's fear that the TPLF is not done and that the end is not conclusive and that they may come back and that the Ethiopian government may leave, may abandon them, then I think that might be dragging out. But if the Ethiopian government is able to demonstrate that they're in control, they're not going to abandon the people of Tigray anymore, the TPLF is done. I have no doubt at all that the mothers of Tigray who are forced to give up their child at gunpoint, the fathers of Tigray who were denied food aid unless they gave their child up for war, the youth of Tigray that were conspired and that were beaten and that were forced to go in as a human wave and died, they don't want to suffer anymore. And they know the cause of their suffering is the TPLF. And as areas are liberated, as the people come face to face with the troops, with the Ethiopian troops, with the new transitional government, and when they see the kindness, the compassion, that they're there to help them, minds will change fast. But I think it is all dependent on the Ethiopian government demonstrating and assuring that they're there to stay and that the TPLF is done. I think that would make the big difference. But from what we've seen over the past 4, 5, 6 months of the number of people from Tigray that are fleeing, that are escaping, that are speaking out, I think that the days of the TPLF operating in Tigray as a cult leader, controlling people's mind, those days are over. So I think that it's up to all of us, by the way, not just the government, up to all of us to extend compassion, to reach out to Tigray, to our people in Tigray, and show love. and show unity and solidarity, and fast help rebuild the area, rebuild the schools, the hospitals, and get people's back to regular life as fast as humanly possible. And we can do it.
Yeah, this war has been incredibly damaging, both on the ground and I would argue also in the diaspora. Yerus, is that something that concerns you? Not just whatever is happening on the ground there in Ethiopia, but what has happened to the diaspora because of this narrative clash, largely fueled by the State Department and mainstream media?
Yes, definitely. I think that even the last time, the Ethiopian government took control of Mekelle and Tigray, there was a lot of violent videos that were encouraging disinformation, and I think it had impact on the ground. We have had people say, spray blood on yourself and go out and scream when the U.S. ambassadors and others come. There was a call for violence in Addis and other parts of Ethiopia, and that was coming from the diaspora. That was a diaspora calling those sort of violence while they don't have stake on the ground. While they, it's not their kids that are being used as cannon fodders, while they're living luxurious life in the West. And so I'm very, I hope that, the diaspora have realized the impact they've had and the damages that they've done to the people that are there that are facing the consequence, and that they caution themselves in when they say things, when they call out for violence and hate and instigate those things that actually impact people on the ground. And then I think the other thing that I hope would happen is that these politicians, there is a lot of talk about you mentioned earlier, maybe these leaders will not come back to Ethiopia, that they will get asylum, whether in Canada or somewhere in Africa, wherever it may be. But they've done so much damage to the people of Tigray. Thousands of generations, thousands of young men, young women with huge potential have lost their life. And now we have mothers who are not going to have, their sons and daughters to be able to help them. And so I hope that the diaspora is recognizing those things, that and that they realize that these things that we echo on social media or call for violence, that they're having real impact on the people that are on the ground, and that they refrain from doing such thing and actually advocate for peace, advocate for fairness, equality, justice, all the good things that we want for our people. And so because I think we've noticed how huge of an impact that the diaspora community has back home. And so I really hope that we've learned some lessons from the previous event, and that we actually continue to advocate for peace instead of continuing to use words that continue to flame the fire. And create more hate, more division, more violence for the people that are on the ground are being impacted heavily.
Right. And what we're essentially talking about is reconciliation. Now that the military operation may wrap in the coming days, in the coming weeks, but soon, now we have a little bit of space to talk about what does reconciliation look like. And here, as you touched on the division among the diaspora and how that can fuel what's happening on the ground. Simon, we'll wrap with you. What are the elements of reconciliation? I mean, Ethiopia is an incredible country. Eritrea is an incredible country with a lot of history. The region has so much history, and it can get complicated at times. Issues of identity of being Ethiopian and Eritrean, depending on what area you're looking at, you might get different answers from people. And the same is true with Ethiopia, depending on what community you're talking to, what era they lived in, what kind of history they heard in their households. You get different takes. So what are the elements of reconciliation that we can keep in mind and that we can actually be a part of and engage in?
I think, we have to remember, despite whatever country we come from, whatever tribe, ethnicity, clan, religion, at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all human beings. And I think it's important to remember that, or I think it's important to say and believe earnestly that we are human beings before we're anything else, and so I think we're going to have to, really internalize and believe that as, this war ends and people start looking at each other and saying, where do we go next? And there's so many historical grievances that have not been addressed, reconciled, and that reconciliation process is going to happen. But it shouldn't just start then. It should start now. It's an everyday thing. You have to build solidarity and understanding, and with your neighbor, no matter what they are, their differences and all that kind of stuff. And so as the conflict with TPLF ends, the different antagonisms that exist already in society between nations, between ethnicities, between clans, between all this stuff, they have to be reconciled. And so I think right now we have to start from a people to people process. And with each individual, each and every one of us, I remember saying this to you, actually tweeting about this when I used to exist on Twitter, to you specifically, speaking to you when you came, when you saw the craziness of TPLF, all the horrible things they said, you used the phrase that, it's like a cult, and you hadn't even used that phrase yet. You were just simply questioning their narrative at that point. And there were immediate attacks on you because of why. The first thing they thought was, oh, she said this, in 2000, whatever. She said that, she did this, all that kind of stuff, the whole history. This is what Wayana did, therefore she's Wayana, blah, blah, blah. And you start thinking of the entire past, But the thing is, we have to think about the future. Everything about us has to be more future-oriented, not thinking about what happened yesterday. Yesterday does matter, and it does have to be reconciled. But but what I'm trying to say is that in that tweet that I wrote, I remember it said, we have to be patient and compassionate. And I remember I got attacked for it because maybe people thought it was disingenuous or insincere, but I genuinely meant it. And I really do feel that's the two things that we need right now are patience and compassion. Assuming there is a, moderate level of security. It's hard to be patient when your house is being, burned down or some crazy thing is happening. So we need security. But when we have that security, we have to really be patient and compassionate with people, and be very open-minded. That's another one I want to add to that. Understanding that there are different flags, different histories, different understandings of what borders should be, what food is best and all that stuff. We should live and let live and really have this kind of mentality. And we need to bake that into this movement. And we have to understand that this is a peace movement. No more is a very strong message, but this is against exploitation. But among ourselves, we're talking about unity. We're talking about solidarity. It's baked. It's in the mission statement even. And so when we're talking about, unity, I think that it starts with us. And so to be patient, to be compassionate, and to be open-minded, I think is a great starting place. And again, we are a peace movement. And so just when we say that, you have to believe it. You have to internalize it. So, and I have to say, language, please, 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 everyone with our language, tone it down. Tone it down. And we don't need to do, this whole, we did this, we defeated you, blah, 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 this and that. That's not the way of hire people. The culture of the people of the region and the Horn of Africa, we know it. It is such a great culture, such a beautiful culture where it's very, very understanding. There are systems in place where we come together and we resolve our issues, and so that culture, we have to retreat to some of that and find that within us to bring us together and be magnanimous is the word I'm looking for. So magnanimous, don't try to own anyone. Don't be petty. It's just not the time. And don't antagonize TPLF people. We're trying to win those people over, by having the right vision for the Horn of Africa that is very inclusive of them. So just be very welcoming. I know it's not going to be easy, but we have to do it because we have to live together and we have to imagine a future together. So anyway, that's my final message. And I hope that we'll start with ourselves.
I think that's a good point to end. We have to live together. I mean, ultimately, we have to share the same country, neighbors, we're family, literally, and friends and all of that. I think a lot of broken relationships need to be healed. So thank you guys so much for spending your Friday night with me. I really appreciate all of your takes. We're going into day 6 of the African Union talks tomorrow. And so we're going to take a break over the weekend, but I'll be back to Monday night, rather, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And thank you, everybody, for commenting and sending in your questions. Stay strong, stay optimistic, and we'll continue to follow what's going on the ground, as well as what comes out of the African Union peace talks for you. And we'll be back with more analysis on Monday. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Nebiu. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Ayerus. Bye, guys. I don't know if I muted people, so bye. Good night. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this link with everybody that you know. So if they didn't get a chance to watch it live, they'll be able to watch it later. Please support independent journalism. You guys know we launched the Eyes on Africa website, eoanews.com. That's eoanews.com, so you can go there and contribute to support independent journalism. There's also patreon.com/HermelaTV. You see eoanews.com there. So you go there, you hit donate, and you could do a one-time contribution. Or if you want to become a member, go to patreon.com/HermelaTV, sign up, and you can become a monthly member. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for watching all week. I'll be back Monday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. We will know by then what, if anything, have come out of the Ethiopia peace talks in South Africa, the African Union peace talks in South Africa. So we'll be back with some more amazing guests, and check out some of the previous videos on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/HermelaTV. Yesterday, I did an incredible interview, not incredible because I did it, but because he was incredible. Lawrence Freeman, a political economic analyst on Africa, had such insightful analysis of who the TPLF is, what the US's role is in all this, and even goes further to really help suggest how Ethiopians and Eritreans and people of the Horn should expect, or what we should expect from the U.S., what we shouldn't expect, and what may come out of these talks. So go back and check that out. And if you missed the other episodes earlier this week, they're also found on my YouTube page. Thank you so much. Have an amazing weekend. If anything breaks, we will be back here on youtube.com/HermelaTV. Good night or good morning, wherever you are.